The Buffalo Bills linebacker coach, Bob Babich, is going to be retiring. Nothing official here, but it looks like he's going to be retiring. And his son, Bobby Babich, who is currently the team's safeties coach, is going to be taking over that responsibilities. And hey, I'll tell you what, I don't know a ton about Bobby, but if he has anything to do with the way those safeties have been playing together over the last couple of years, I'm all for it. You kind of look at the Bills' linebacking core, and we have Matt Milano, obviously, was a converted safety, kind of that roaming the field space linebacker, and then you have just that athletic freak in Tremaine Edmonds, and it kind of brings me to the first thing I want to talk about tonight, and that's just kind of this continuous but also new direction of the Bills as far as the coaching staff goes. And this to me is something that we've kind of been talking about for a couple of years. When your team starts having success and a guy like Brian Dable, a guy like Leslie Frazier are turning in these top units in the league, and we're making some noise in the playoffs and making championship games. It's a natural trend in the league for these guys to get different opportunities. And I've talked about it on the show a couple times of kind of the mark of a good to great franchise is when you get to those points in the road, how you adjust to that, how you build from that going forward. And the Bills have made some pretty exciting moves, in my opinion, this offseason. And I think kind of where the coaching staff sits as of now, we have just a good blend of some youth and some experience, and we have some guys that were brought in from outside. We have other guys that were promoted from within, and there's something to be said for the continuity. And specifically here, I'm thinking about Ken Dorsey taking the reins as the offensive coordinator, and while I think that's great to have somebody that's been in the building who's been working with these players, kind of seeing the day-to-day of what they're doing. But then also, there's the issue of he hasn't been a play caller. So you bring in Joe Brady, another younger guy from outside of the organization. And, it's still a guy that has called plays, so somebody to bounce ideas off of. So I think that kind of the changes that they're making due to, spots being open, it's not just this attack at getting all these young hotshot next guy names in there. There, to me, is a good blend of having that experience and having some youthfulness. One of the guys that they did bring in, he's a little bit older. I believe he's 54. Is Aaron Cromer, and has been discussed here. But I think that's something that really excites me to get a fresh set of eyes on. Because Bobby Johnson was always a coach that, I felt he was a pretty good coach. I had respect for him. But then we're kind of looking at the beginning of this past season and how much our line was struggling. And yes, towards the tail end of the season, they were coming along. But I don't think that it hurts in some of these spots to get a fresh set of eyes on it and kind of be able to dial up some different things. And, I'm looking at a guy like Cody Ford, and, we have the Wyatt Teller example that will always be in our back pocket of, was it kind of coaching, or did he just take a little bit longer to develop? And we'll never really know what the answer is there. But having some young pieces in the locker room on that offensive line right now, I'm intrigued to see what he does with, some of the steady starters, talking Mitch Morris, Deion Dawkins, but also, what kind of second year leap can we look for out of Spencer Brown? I'm guessing that, while the line was a little bit more stabilized towards the end of the season, we probably look to free agency in the draft to add a couple more pieces, in particular, on that interior offensive line where we had some struggles. And I think there's going to be a lot of question marks along that offensive line. We're talking, we do have free agents in Ike Botker and Ryan Bates. I imagine they try to keep both of them around, but we're also kind of looking at Ike Botker being an unrestricted free agent. So, does somebody swoop in and try to get him off the team? Looking at you, New York Giants, they have familiarity with the player, pretty suspect offensive line, and, that might be the kind of player that they look to be like, he might not be all pro every year, but we know he's a steady presence there. So let's kick the tires on that and kind of have him be the stopgap while we figure out the rest of it. I imagine Ryan Bates is back. But then I also look at a guy like Darrell Williams. We extended him to be that right tackle, and he kicks inside and plays pretty well at guard. And contract wise, I don't think he's paid horribly unreasonably to be a starting guard in the NFL. But there's also some options built into his contract of, if we're looking to save some money and we think that we can get, some cheaper talent in there, maybe somebody younger through the draft, that could be an option. So I know I kind of started off here talking about the coaches, and I'm kind of on the offensive line now, but I think a lot of the coaching changes are going to be kind of make your own little tweaks, and all the infrastructure is kind of in place to run back what we did last year. And I think the offensive line is going to be an area where we might see a little bit more change than we expect. I don't expect Feliciano back. There's this constant kind of quiet chatter of, Mitch Morse being a big cap hit, and do we let him go? Personally, I'd be more in favor of moving some money around and extending Mitch a couple of years. I think he's a little bit underrated at the center position, considering kind of the idea of the line having to play as one unit and having these rotating pieces next to him. And, Ike Botker gets shuffled into the game, and Cody Ford is in there next to him. And I feel like with continuity, with just slightly better play at the guard positions, Mitch Morse is still a very adequate center. So it's kind of my thoughts on the offensive line. We also had Matthew Smiley be promoted to the special teams coordinator, and this is a move that I don't know where I land on it. Overall, I feel like the Bills, for the past several seasons, which he was, a part of the coaching staff for, I feel like overall the special teams has been pretty good, and we get to a year like this past season, and I guess I ultimately don't know how much I can blame the coaching staff. And I know we can bring up, the last 13 seconds of the Kansas City game, and that one's still fresh with us. But overall, for the body of work of the season, I feel like we had a lot of gaffes in the return games, but I don't know how much I put that on coaching versus the players going out and executing. I think there is definitely the benefit of having Andre Roberts doing the punt and kick return duties, and his decision making, and kind of leaving his explosive playability out of it. Because I think we had a couple guys back there this year in McKenzie and Stevenson that, had that explosive play potential, but it's the little nuances of making sure you're protecting the ball and fielding punts cleanly and all that. And I feel like the biggest mistakes that we saw in special teams were more of poor decision making on the field and errors there, and I can't put that too much on the coaching staff. I do think the special teams has also benefited from the Bills as an organization making a conscious effort to have some of those guys that are special teams aces. We're talking Tywan Jones, Tyler Medikevich, some of the players like that. And I think that will be another interesting thing to look at this offseason of, some of those guys, are we going to rework money? We just have a lot of money invested into the special teams. So, was the success that the special teams was having a product of just having those players, or good coaching, or kind of a combination of the two? And I feel like I would land in that category. And for the most part, if you take away some of the fielding and ball security errors on the team, which again I have a hard time attributing just to coaching. I think if you just put somebody back there that's more sure-handed, like we saw Micah Hyde doing in the playoffs, I think we feel a lot differently about the special teams this year. And no, I don't want our plan in the future to be Micah Hyde returning kicks because we trust his hands back there. But I think that's a position that we kind of were looking at a lot last offseason, and we brought in players like Lance Lenoir just kind of trying to cover that specific position. And I think that's, we talk about all the needs going into free agency and the draft, and we can talk about cornerback, we can talk offensive line, we can talk defensive end, defensive tackle. We have all of these needs that exist, but I think something that kind of goes underrated and something that we don't talk about enough is, whether it's one player or two, that the kick returning and punt returning duties. And I think that's a major thing that we have to look at this offseason and see how that shakes out. But overall, pretty excited with the direction of the coaching staff. Obviously, it's with having the playoff loss still in our minds, and kind of seemingly being not only the last 13 seconds, but some questionable coaching decisions along the way. It's kind of weird to sit in this chair right now and look at small retoolings of the coaching staff and feel this confidence. And I think there are still question marks, but overall, I really like the blend that they've put together of experience and youth, and kind of trying to get these next up and coming guys that will likely take, maybe we see Dorsey taking a head coaching job in 3-4 years, and if he has success with Josh Allen like Daboll did, and this is kind of the start of that Sean McDermott coaching tree, and